Baba knows the way. For Joseph Baba Ifá. Baba knows the way. We follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients. He honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.
Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifá. Where only the strongest roots see the light, brought to you by Botaniga Candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, hit that subscribe button. What's up, Phil?
Happy Sunday! Hey, man.
What's happening, bro?
Not much, man. I think today's going to be another banger of an episode, guys.
Stellar.
Make sure y'all leave a comment. Make sure you subscribe and share it with a friend. You know, we're going to get to 200,000 very soon.
What are we going to do, man? We got to do something special, man. That's epic.
They
don't give no button for that one, though, right?
No. They stopped. They used to do them at every 100,000 interval.
Oh, man, jeez.
But now they just do 1 million. So
you only get another button at a milli?
At a milli, then 10 milli, then 100 milli.
Oh, but at that point, I mean, geez, you know.
Yeah.
Whatever, we're going to get there someday.
Yeah, but you know how we can get there even faster?
How?
Is if you guys join our membership program.
Join the membership program.
Yeah, real simple. Right under this video, there's a button that says join. Click that button. Takes you to a magical place where only exclusive people can be. Right? We have special tiers that offer different perks for each different tier. That's extra episodes, discounts on merch and classes or courses. We'll be answering a lot of these questions that pop up in the comments only on the membership videos. So we've got a few of those that are scheduled to be released where Joseph goes in a little deeper than just a sentence or two. So Make sure you guys join our membership program. It's real simple and real fun. So, yeah.
Guys, if you're in there, be sure to let somebody know about it if you feel like they could benefit from it. Can't wait to see you guys at the workshops as well. Every day we're getting closer to Atlanta and New York, so be sure to get in there if you haven't. A couple spaces left. Today's episode is Ifá and Vice.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, when we talk about vices are habits that lose control, right? I remember one person, I forgot who it was online, that said, a vice is something that you don't want to do, but you do it anyway. You know, it's like, I don't feel like doing this today, but I'm going to do it anyway. The question is why, right? And vices, I think, ultimately derive from ewo. Now, the word ewo means taboos. Now, what would be taboo? A taboo is anything that disaligns a person's ori from their destiny. So it could be something as simple as standing at a four corners. That could be a taboo for you, or it could be something much more intense like a substance, right? So we're going to delve into the various vices that Ifá identifies as unproductive, so we know what we should not do as practitioners of Ifá. I will say that the practitioner of Ifá and Orisha should be held to a higher standard, because when you know better, you do better, right? Ifá went through a very interesting process when it arrived in the New World, whether it was arriving to Cuba through the slave trade, which was horrible, coming out of Cuba due to, ultimately the Mariel boat lift in the 80s, right? So this whole time I've been doing this intro, I've been thinking of Tony Montana, right? And, who he reminds me of in one of these Patakis. But, the fact that a huge demographic of our practitioners in the U.S. at that point came over on the Mariel is because some of them might have been incarcerated and been doing things that they should not have been. I remember speaking to a couple of older brothers from Cuba and Miami, and them explaining that, there were whole blocks in jail over there of Babalaos, who had made some mistakes and were in jail, and they were studying together. A lot of guys went into jail not knowing Ifá and came out as beasts, because all you can do in there is push-ups and flip pages, right? So you had a lot of really amazing Babalaos come out of jail. And, when you talk about Ifá being a very regal religion in Africa, and then due to it being brought over by the slaves, we were put under marginal conditions. The solal is basically a project, right? We're in marginal areas. There's poverty. There's a bunch of things that could lead us astray. So Ifá was affected by that to a certain degree. And then when, you go to metropolises like a New York or a Miami or, any of these original places that Ifá was, even Tampa, some things happen, right? So we just want to go over all of the different things that Ifá speaks about and what we should avoid that are, problems, whether it's old world or new world. So the first vice we're going to be going over is gambling, right? It's mentioned in a couple different odus. The first one we're going to go over is the Rosofung, right? And the Odu of Rosofung was where Obatala had a gambling addiction, right? And I hate to say this, but I stand by it. I think Obatala was the king of vice. I think he is the Orisha who taught all the other Orishas vice. Being that he was the first Orisha, he was the first one exposed to a lot of these things. And because of it, he had no one to guide him on it. Olodumare kind of threw him out of heaven. He's basically making humanity on his own. He's experiencing a lot of these things for the first time with no guidance. So I don't think it was a reflection of him as a person per se, but it is a reflection of human character when it is unmitigated by sense. So in the Odu Sofung was where Obatala created a gambling habit, right? In the beginning, it was a scratch off. And then, when he had a couple extra dollars, he ended up at the Hard Rock, right? But in all seriousness, it got to the point where, a lot of people were trying to initiate into Orisha with Obatala, but Obatala had this habit. So what he was doing was he would take the money for Orisha, thousands of dollars, and he would gamble it off, right? Now, this is a big issue because when the Orisha process comes, how do we pay the Oriate? How do we pay the Animalero, the Yerbero, the Santero? Everybody, everybody gets broken off. So what he would do is when people would actually come to do Orisha, he would set a trap in front of his door so they would fall to their death. A little bit extreme, but that's how.
Wait a second, like a trap door?
Yeah, so he had this rug on his front door that said "Welcome Home." No. I don't know. This is just me embellishing a little bit, but there was something there. Maybe it was an etera, whatever. But they say that they would walk up to his door the day they were supposed to crown, and they would stand on the mat and fall to their death because he had like a pit that had spikes coming out of it, So one person went to initiate with Obatala, but this person had Hand of Ifá. So they had a godfather. So before going into Orisha, they did a consultation to see how things were going to go. And the Odu of Irosofung was revealed, where Ifá told them to perform sacrifice, right, or ebo, and to leave their ebo to the side of Obatala's door, right? So when they did that on their way to be initiated into Orisha, they dropped the ebo and listened to Orumila. They were told not to move after that and to just wait for Obatala to come get them. So when they hollered out, Padrino, I'm here to crown Orisha, Obatala was like, huh? Because he was trying to get him to come closer to the door so he would fall through the mat and die.
Oh, Lord.
So after a while, the guy stopped responding and he waited for Obatala to come to the door. But when Obatala came to the door and saw that the guy was still alive, he had a heart attack and died. And then the guy, walked over the mat because obviously at that point from Obatala falling, the mat fell through. And he kind of saw that, no one was there for the Orisha process. He saw a little bit of money and where Obatala had stolen money from everybody. Like it was a real horror scene. But gambling was identified as a very intense vice, and Obatala was seen as the perpetuator of it. He's one of the ones that really started it and showed it to others. But this Odu also provides a very important lesson to people who are trying to initiate into Orisha. You have to get to know the people that are going to be initiating you. You want to make sure you're initiating into an ethical house. You want to make sure you're initiating into a stable house. I'm not saying your godfather has to be a millionaire. No one should know that anyway. Neither here nor there. But you want to make sure they're stable. You want to make sure that, they have a home, their family's well, look at their family, look at their partner, look at their religious house. You have to look at all of these conditions to make this decision. You want to see their social medias. You want to make sure you understand everything you're getting involved with overall. All of these things now that we have to think about as modern Ifá and Orisha practitioners, because there's nothing worse than initiating into a house and then seeing a certain video or anything like that. And you're like, man, I just initiated with this guy or this lady and they're a complete wreck, right? So that was the situation with Obatala and Sofung. He put on a good front in the beginning. He was able to hold it long enough until he got the money. And then, he just went crazy with vice. And, gambling can lead to other things because, Lord knows what you see in a casino. There might be somebody selling this over here, some of this going on over there, and it just becomes a debacle at that point. So gambling is ideally one that we keep under control. Now, mind you, there are Odus that say, hey, gamble, right? But you have to know how to interpret that. Like when you look at the Odù of Obetwa or Oturarigo, it says, yeah, play the lotto because you might win. That doesn't mean we play the lotto every day. It might not be referring to the Florida lotto. It could be referring to you were lucky enough to win an amazing partner, or look at the child that Olodumare has given you, or there's so many other ways to win the lotto without ever, buying a ticket with a flamingo on it, Another Pataki that speaks about gambling is in the Odù of Oturadi. And in the Odù of Oturadi was where the person got a huge sum of money, right? Now, Orumila had told the person to perform sacrifice so that the money would not leave as quickly as it came. But they had money now, so they didn't need God. They're like, everything's great. I've done Ebo before. I'm good. Bye, Orula. You're not getting another penny out of me. And Orula was like, all right. So the person runs into Eshu, disguised as a salesman, right? And the salesman has a sack. And he goes up to the person and says, hey, this sack has something magical in it, has something incredible in it. If you give me $1 million, I'll give you the sack. And the guy was addicted to gambling. And he was like, he started having an anxiety attack completely. He couldn't live with the idea of not knowing what was in that bag. So he made the fatal decision of giving this random guy $1 million. And he took the sack. The guy disappeared, and when he opened the sack, it was full of goat horns. So, he basically gave away his life savings for something that was worthless, right? Okay. He went running back to Orula. Orula said, hey, you didn't do the Ebo. Eshu got mad at you. And, this is what happens, and Lord knows what came after that. How do you explain that one to your wife? But another prime example, we cannot gamble anything we need. Right? So even if you are somebody that invests in stocks, somebody who plays the market, remember that you should only invest in dollar you don't need at all. That's real investment, because there is an aspect of gambling there, whether it's a Bitcoin, whether it's a business venture. Not everything is slots and la bolita, in the back of the Hialeah gas station, you know what I'm saying? So you have to be very careful what you risk and what you don't, because it could have very dramatic effects on your home. There's people who have gambled away their homes, their cars, their lives. They've lost everything because of it, just for the seeking of the thrill and the adrenaline that comes with it and the anxiety from not doing it. We have to have the tranquility and serenity to not allow things like that to sway us, right?
Yeah. Man, I've seen it. I've been to the Hard Rock a couple times, and I've seen some people who should not be there. You know what I mean? And they, yeah.
What's even wilder is you run into somebody that owes you money. You're
right.
like, dude, you owe me $20. It reminds me of the movie A Bronx Tale. You get rid of them for a bill. But yeah, it happens, man. Like people, yeah, they go through it. And it happens. It's not just somebody at a slot machine. It could be white collar, Wall Street. You never know what people are going through or what they're into. So this is one of the things that Ifá says we should ideally avoid. This has never been an issue for me because I suck at gambling. I mean, I can't win nothing, dog. I mean, my greatest, victories have been my wife, my children, my home, everything that I've worked for. At the end of the day, Idete Suga is the son of sacrifice. So I noticed from the very beginning, gambling for me, just doesn't work. So, but other people, they get a little lucky and luck runs out, but you do have those people who do get on a roll. Now, you notice it's ironic because if you look at like professional poker players and things like that, I don't think they fall into that category because it's their job. They have a certain amount of income, they're working, but it is a fine line. You're walking across the razor's edge, So, speaking of which, another popular vice that, we should mention that Ifá mentions is that of drugs, right? Narcotics, hallucinogens, and all the above. Orunmila, in the Odù Ifá, was addicted to heroin, right? Or opiates, and any of its derivatives. In this Odù, Orunmila was invited to Arafilani, or Asia, to perform Ifá work and establish himself. And he performed divination beforehand, and the Odù Ifá Owonring was revealed, where Ifá told him to perform sacrifice beforehand and to fulfill his function and leave, to not accept gifts or pleasantries or any of these things, right? All of these are precautions, and when we violate them is when we delve into ewo, or taboo, which is the father of vice, in my opinion. And Orunmila did not do any of the above. He didn't perform sacrifice. He didn't prepare. He didn't really pay attention to Ifá's advice because he was so intrigued by the idea of making all this money. So when he arrived, it was custom to be offered opium, right, or heroin. So he took a hit, and it basically, he got addicted. He had never experienced anything like that in Africa before. And he ended up becoming an addict, they say, for 7 years. And they say that the people he was interacting with did this on purpose to be able to control him and manipulate him and nullify him, because they didn't want the competition that Ifá provided, even all the way in the East. So they say he went through this 7 years living in an opium den, right, the way the scripture says. And then one day, his opele, or his chain, fell out of his pocket, and the Odù Ifá was revealed. And at that moment, he snapped out of it, and he said, yo, it's been 7 years, man. And Ifá told me about this. I got to get out of here, because if not, this is going to be the end of my life. And, he picked up his chain, and he just ran for dear life, because they were trying to kill him. They were trying to get him. And he said, I'll never go back to Asia again. And he really didn't. So if we interpret Ifá, it says that, we have to be careful, because we don't know how our body is going to react to whatever, we can put into it. There's people who, can handle addiction for decades, unfortunately, some of us are from areas where we know people like that.
Yeah, functioning addicts.
Functioning, weekend warriors, as we like to call them. It's wild, man. You people with serious addiction. I've met people that are extremely and uberly intelligent that are going through this, and it's a coping mechanism for them. But in Orunmila's case, it was a perfect example. He took one hit and it was over, This is why Ifá says that these kind of substances are not ideal or are vicious, because they alter Ori. If Ori is our internal destiny or our spiritual brain and psyche, these are things that interrupt with it, or interrupted in a way that is completely counterproductive, whether it's our neuroreceptors, the burning and destroying of them, all the effects that any kind of various drug could have on the brain. It's to alter or compensate for something, because sometimes we could be ingesting something and it's replacing a function for us, and then when we need to provide it on our own or produce it on our own, the body doesn't do it no more. It takes time because we've been fulfilling that need somewhere else. Now, opium, right? We're talking about something, it's a little older, antiquated maybe, even though something else is derived from it, like the heroin and whatnot. The poppy seed bagel. No, we're not talking about that. Did you ever see that Seinfeld episode?
No, man. I never caught on the Seinfeld.
You didn't? I don't know why I thought you were a Seinfeld guy.
No, my dad was, but
that's why. Good man.
Yeah.
Good man. We gotta get you on Seinfeld, sir.
Yeah.
But any of these things. I mean, you look at a lot of this prescription medication. A lot of people, they break an ankle and then they become addicts, or they become, overindulgent in these things because it's just highly, highly addictive substances, and the processes they provide. And while we're on the topic of drugs, Ifá is not an illegally accepting religion. This is not the drug dealer's religion. This is not the assassin's religion. This is not the criminal's religion. You know, unfortunately, due to Ifá's miraculousness, some people have given it a misnomer of being any of these demographics' religion, right? Now, mind you, Ifá does speak of scripture, like in the Odù of Ogundavede, where the gentleman had a criminal past and he was able to absolve himself within the practice of Ifá. Oturasa speaks of this, like Obetrupong speaks of this, where the person comes from marginal beginnings and is trying to change their life. And I think there are miraculous cases there, but it's not just Ifá work that did that. It was their own internal work, changing of environment possibly, because sometimes we are products of where we're from, right? Not everybody is from a beautiful place, aesthetically. But I think that's an important point to make up front, because, there are people that are trying to utilize Ifá for, nefarious things. And, Orula does not condone anything that is not in line with the law of the land that you live. That's in the Odù of Okanarosum, where Ifá says, to the land that you go, do what you see. So we are subject to law. Obadala is the Orisha of law, probably because he broke all of them at one point, God bless him. But the Orishas and Ifá do not condone any type of illegal activity. Now, for something to be morally illegal is something different, that which is inhumane and unjust. Yes, Ifá stands against these things. But, if in the land where you're from, you're not allowed to do fraud, or you're not allowed to, sell drugs, or you're not allowed to, kill nobody, or any of these things, you have to suffer the consequences. Dimei says your intentions may have been good, but if your actions were bad, we have to suffer those consequences, even if you're sorry. So, I think this is a really important one as well. In the Odù Irosowani was where Orunmila established his practice in Asia, right? And one of the things, apart from his holistic medicine and methods that he brought, there's a lot of aspects of Ifá that were left in Asia, by the way. The I Ching, quite resembles the opele, or the coins that they throw with the heads and tails and things like that, and the combinations that come from it. Holistic medicine, the herbs, all of these things. Well, one thing that Orunmila started doing was trafficking opium. When he went over there, he was like, I do my little Ifá thing, I sell a little dope, and we go from there.
Man, there's a future song I want to play.
Yeah, it was just right. Mask off, right? But he started moving weight, and he started becoming a big shot with it. He started really taking over. Right, a scene out of American Gangster, and the people that were there weren't a fan of his monopolization of this traffic, so they said, we're gonna go kill him. So that day, Orunmila threw his chain, and the Odù of Irosowani came out, where Ifá said immediately he needed to evict himself from his home to be able to save him and his family, which he did. And when he immediately left, due to his obedience of Ifá, maybe he was able to take a little money, maybe he wasn't, but when he left, he looked back and he saw that his enemies were ransacking his home and lighting it on fire. They took some of his work, and it was over with, So Orunmila realized that just because he was in the position of Babalawo or Olorisha or Palero or whatever, that did not condone him performing illegal activity. Okana Rosung speaks of this as well, where he fell into taboo and did things in the land where he lived that weren't accepted, even though they were accepted in his. Understand that Ifá accepts people from all walks of life. But once you arrive in Ifá, it's because you're meant to live within the code of conduct that is Ifá. Ifá is not a gang. Ifá is not any of these things. Ifá is a spirituality that is meant to help people understand themselves, to live to their fullest legal and healthy potential. So I just want to make a note of that, because that is a vice as well. The trafficking of narcotics is a taboo within Ifá, just like all illegal things are, right? So I thought it was important to mention, because drugs in itself is seen as a vice, and Orunmila here was a narcotraficante, right? Yeah, right. So, and another drug, right? One that is seen in movies and things like that. Have you seen the movie Scarface? Is cocaine, right? In the Odù of Baba Ifá, and this is the part that makes me think of Tony Montana. In the Odù of Baba Ifá was where Obatala's son wanted to initiate into the practices of Mayombe, right? Or anything outside of Ifá, ultimately. And one of the things that he wanted to really specialize in was powders, right? Now, Obatala, based on his past experiences, had outlawed powders because at one point he was addicted to all of them. You know, he was addicted to salt, right? He was addicted to sugar, right? He was addicted to cocaine, right? He cursed all of the white powders in Eyobe. So when he saw his son getting involved in it, he said, hey, I don't want none of that in the house, you know, because one of the powders he was delving with was the powder of bones, right? Which is grayish white. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I don't want none of that in here. And through his son interacting with the dead on that level in an unguided fashion, he fell into the other vices as well. And one of them was what we call perico, right? And, Batala, based on his son's addiction, basically kicked him out of the house. He said, I can't have you here like this, right? In some versions, he continued with his addiction and, maybe he unfortunately transitioned from it. In others, he was able to get the help he needed from Orumila and rehab and, fall into the good graces with his father once more. But, Ifá states, once again, it cursed the white powders, right? That's why if you notice, a lot of the things in Ifá are natural, right? And when we talk about, the white powders, most of them aren't good. I can't think of one that isn't vicious, Salt is addicting. From the moment it was actually the first addiction, where eating is a vice and an addiction as well. And we'll talk about that in the Odù Ifá. But there's not one white powder that isn't addicting. Flour, sugar, any of these things, without measure, could be very dangerous to the body, and obviously cocaine. So in the Odù Ifá is where that became a serious issue, right? And ultimately the powders within Ifá, is seen as good when it came to proper medicine and whatnot, the akoshe and things like that. But the others, as far as ogu and things like that, not good. Now we have this thing called cannabis, right? It is a plant, right? But when we talk about vice, we talk about immoderate behavior. So just because something is medicine doesn't mean that in an immoderate sense, it's good for you, right? Anything outside of moderation, because I say moderation is everything, is a vice. So it was definitely one that was spoken about and stipulated in this corpus of Ifá. And, in the Odù of Ofun Batrupon or Ofun Mutaba was where Orumila incorporated cannabis into his life for the healing effects and the spiritual effects. I mean, he was under spiritual attack. He started smoking marijuana, and because of it, he was able to defeat his enemies, right? But then you have other versions of the story where, or other versions and other Odus of interactions with this leaf, such as Obarayekun, right, or Obarakuye, where it was Olodumari's personal plant because it was seen as the only plant that could take people to the height and level of Olodumari's consciousness, right? So it was something that he would distribute, basically the Ifá of the dispensary. And his gardener was Eshu, right, or Elegba. And, he was like, yo, Dad, can I? He was like, yeah, whatever's left over, the shake, light it up. And, he started smoking, cannabis. And it became a little immoderate, where he was smoking every time he would go to work or before bed, or he was looking like Wiz Khalifa, at some point, or Snoop, God bless. And it got to the point where the business shut down, or the business was slowing down, because Eshu couldn't even function at that point. Like, he was so lifted, he was like, I can't even move right now. So I don't know what strand it was. But, Olodumare looked at him and said, my son, he's not functional at this point. Neurons are gone. He's overindulged. Son, just live in the garden. And they say that Eshu spent the rest of eternity resting on a bed of cannabis in Olodumare's garden. So, right out of, a Method Man and Red Man movie. But everything in moderation. Cannabis saves lives. THC saves lives. CBD saves lives. There's no question about it. It is medicine, but everything in moderation, because codeine is medicine. Cocaine was used as medicine at one point. Methamphetamine was used as a stimulant at one point. I'm not saying that it's in that same category by any regard, but I am saying that without moderation, something very positive could become extremely negative, right? So it's definitely something that each person needs to identify within their own tolerance and productivity, because Oromila consumed cannabis. He was an advocate for it, but he also used it, productively as well. So when we're talking about, the drugs and whatnot, that's pretty much it. So here we go now. Alcohol, right? Alcohol is a necessary part of Ifá. Without it, we really can't function, or Oti, as it's known. But for the Orishas primarily. Now, when we talk about Ifá is not a party, but it is a celebration, right? So you might see the brother drummers with a small bottle there, or the Babalaos on the last table of Ifá. There might be a bottle of wine there, or, all of the brother and sister Orishas are about to take out Aches. Anybody want, something to get us through that process, loosen up the blood. I actually spoke to an older Babalao one time, and he was a master opener. Like, him with the knife it was poetry, dog. And I used to notice every time before he would open, he would have a shot of whiskey. This guy was a statesman. He was a gentleman, dog. And you just see him there with his knives, and I'm like, oh, this guy. So I went over to him. I said, yo, Mayor, none for none. Why you take a shot every time you're about to open? Are you stressed out? And he was like, no, my son. He said, I do this to raise my body temperature, which actually protects me from infection. So if, God forbid, I inhale something or an animal or I cut myself or whatnot, it should protect me. And then apart from that, if I do, I need to wash my hands with alcohol and see how I can, wrap up. So I was like, man, it is a necessary part. Now, there's differences here. The Odù Ifá speaks of it, where when we're actually in ceremony, like, for example, it's definitely not something I want to see a brother Oriate doing before, an Ita or anything like that. I don't want to see him having a drink other than coffee. Or, the brother Babalaos that are in Ita pulling out a mano orula, or we're working in Ifá, and it's a very intense part of the day. Definitely none of that. I remember my grandfather Kata always said, the alcohol, or the spirits, better said, are reserved for after ceremony. Once we've gotten through surgery, once we've gotten through everything primordial and we're able to relax, like the day of work is done, then there's a brindi, right? But there's various odus that speak of the immoderation when it comes to alcohol as well, and why there has to be a lot of judiciousness, culture, and experience there, so that we never fall into taboo, because a lot of negative situations within Ifá and Orisha have stemmed from alcohol, right? Or vices in general, right? Like, nothing for nothing. We really don't want to see, any brothers, smoking pot, before we're about to get into ceremony and things like that, and if so, there's discreet ways, if it is medicinal, a pen and things like that, so they can ingest accordingly. But, it's something that has to be very monitored, because you don't want to see your doctor, smoking before cutting you open. Now, from a medicinal standpoint, if he does, he's probably going to do it privately, because he doesn't want anybody, having any prejudice towards him and, his medication. But from an alcohol standpoint, there's various odus, like Otura la lemu and Irete la lera says Otura drinks during the day and goes at night. There's a verse in Ofun Bile, or Ofun Alaye, that says Ofun drinks until Irete throws up. Right? So it's speaking of the immoderation that can come with it. And then when we look at the Odù of Iroso Toda, it speaks of the three phases of alcohol, right? In this Odù, it's the Odù of the cocktail, where the first cocktail actually was manifested. It's I like to call it the Odù of the Long Island iced tea, because it speaks of when Olokun actually rogated Ogun's head with 7 different liquors to be able to take away the 7 negative spirits that were tormenting him. Ogun was definitely an Orisha that had to deal with alcohol addiction and overcome it, because there's another Pataki no Ditauro that we'll talk about. But there's also a version of the story, forgive me, where Ogun ingested 7 different alcohols in one evening. He was mixing. No bueno. So they say that he went through the 3 stages of alcohol. The first stage was that of the monkey, right? I was a monkey. He's always laughing. He's joking. He's acting a fool. He's having a good time. All right, we're all having a good time. Then came the second stage, the stage of the lion, where he became belligerent and aggressive and started attacking people, and no bueno. And then the third stage was the stage of the pig, where he passed out and he threw up on himself and he was sleeping in his own throw up. And the next day he was hungover and he was like, yo, what happened? And Olokun was like, bro, you took it too far. You know, you went full send. You went all the way. So from that came the embarrassment and the lack of prestige. So that's why this Odù says that ideally, other than very, very, very minimal calculated amounts by very experienced practitioners, alcohol should not be ingested, especially during moments of like Ita or things that are crucial and are life-defining. But I will say that there have been very elegant elders that I've interacted with that have known how to conduct themselves. And due to the culture and measure of the house, they have known how to incorporate it in a way that protects them, like with the taking out of the aches or the opening of the animals. You know, as far as drinking in the matanza, I'm not a advocate for that at all. For overall safety and things like that, because, you know, there should not be an open bottle necessarily being passed around in Orisha process or Ifá process, because unless you have a very strong culture there, and most time when you have that strong culture, people don't even drink. Like I've done Ifás and things like that where the bottle never even got opened, where some of the brothers are like, yeah, you know, we don't drink, you know what I'm saying? So, and that's perfectly fine as well. In the Odù of Oditauro, or Diotura, it speaks of when Ogun was addicted to alcohol. And his brother Shango saw that it was destroying his life, or that he was becoming belligerent and things like that. And it was negatively affecting his home, and he was losing everything, his wife, his kids, all these different things. This is one of the Odus that shows the positive relationship between Shango and Ogun, where they supported each other from time to time. So Shango took Ogun to visit Orunmila, right? To deal with his alcoholism, which Orula, in his psychiatric Ifá practice, was able to identify was a coping mechanism of all of the pain he had been through, and possibly PTSD, because Ogun was a retired warrior at that point. And, you know, it was causing anger. So Orunmila had an anger management exercise he would perform with Ogun. He said, every time you feel like killing somebody, I want you to throw a knife at the wall. And Orula had a bucket full of knives, and obviously he moved to the other side of the room. And Ogun, you know, he would go through his therapy and go through his homework and processes, and then out of nowhere, he'd just pick up a knife and throw it at the wall. So by the end of the therapy, where the healing process had really taken place, and Ogun felt fortified and prepared enough to start to handle his own life with semi-recurring sessions, he stood there with Orunmila. And Orula said, Ogun, I want you to look at this wall. The strength that you had to go through this recuperation process, this Alcoholics Anonymous process, look at all the lives that you saved. And there was hundreds of knives on the wall. And Ogun said, you know, I'll never go backwards again. I'll never hurt anybody again. I'll never use alcohol as a way to cope with my pain. You know, I have to use my intellect. I have to use the processes that exist, you know, and the support of experts and the people that love me to be able to overcome that urge, right? And Ogun was able to get clean, right? Because he couldn't really handle alcohol without it becoming vicious for him. So definitely something relatable there. And another thing that's a vice, you know, sex. Sex is a vice, you know, in an unmeasured way. In a positive way, it is one of the greatest things in existence. You know, it allows partners to interact on a much deeper level. It allows us to create children. They say it helps us live longer. So, you know, it's a beautiful thing that Olodumare, you know, instituted from the very beginning. Even if you look at Obatala divided himself in half just to be able to, you know, have intimacy. So, but there's also that without measure, right? And there's various Orishas who had, you know, issues with their libido and the lack of control of it. One prime example is Shango, right? You know, he was a ladies' man. He was at the drums. He was the king. He didn't always stay within his harem, and it caused him a lot of trouble because of it. You know, there's Patakis where, due to his philandering, he lost his children, and it was the most devastating moment of his life. When you look at the Odù of Obaradila and as well as Otrupombirete, Shango was building a home, right? And he was almost done, but he realized he had forgotten the last piece, which was a metal rod that was going to sustain the central foundation of the home in general. So here he was in quite of a pickle. He couldn't move because if he left that, the whole thing would just fall down. So Eshu was walking by and said, "My brother, what happened?" He said, "I need to get this last metal rod because if I don't, the house is going to fall, and I've been working so hard on this. Look, my wife, my kids, everybody's waiting for it." And Eshu said, "I'm going to hold your house up for you, but please don't waste any time. Please come right back because I can only hold this down for so long, bro." And Shango was like, "I'll be as fast as lightning and fire." So he dipped off, right? And on his way to get the rod, he ran into this beautiful woman in the jungle. And he was like, okay, but she was as nature intended. She was in the nude. He's like, this is wild. But he was trying to go and get the rod. And she said, "Hey, Shango, how are you?" He said, "I don't got no time for you. I'm a changed man." You know, he was kind of like Ace Ventura. He's like, "I'm no longer a victim of the flesh." And he's like, "I don't got no time for you. I'm a married man. I got my home waiting for me. I don't got nothing to talk to you about." She's like, "Oh, you don't have an extra 5 minutes for me?" And at that point, the doubt came in. And he looked at her again. And, you know, he was like, oh, my God. So he became weak. And he was with the woman. And then he remembered, oh, my God, I got to go get that rod. He got the rod and went running back to his home. But by the time he got back home, it was completely demolished. And Eshu was sitting there on the corner. And he looked, he said, "Bro, what happened?" He said, "No, why don't you tell me what happened with that woman in the forest?" Shango said, "How do you know about that?" He said, "Bro, I'm Eshu. I know everything, dog. I thought you had enough self-control to get back here and focus on that which was important. You left me holding the house. I couldn't hold it no more. You know, based on what happened, your wife and kids left, you know. Was it worth it?" And Shango said, "Absolutely not." And because of his lack of self-control, not focusing on his home and his relationship, Shango lost everything. And Obaradila and Otrupombirete. That's why Otrupombirete is known as Otrupon et desbaratao, which is Otrupon is the destroyed, you know, because he wasn't able to hold his house together, and it was because of infidelity. Then you have someone who was fidelitous, right? Osang, right? Osang was another Orisha that had quite a libido. But it was to the point where he was literally scaring everyone away. Because every woman he would be with, he would have such a high, intense desire. She was like, this is not productive, you know? So there's various examples as well where there was a lack of measure, you know. Obviously, as healthy adults, we want to spend as much time as we can together. But, you know, there's other things going on in life as well. We got to go to work. We got to pay bills. We got kids. We got all these other things. So we have to be organized. You know, it can't just be, you know, this is what we do all day and we're living under a bridge. So whether that is, you know, infidelity, whether that's interacting with, you know, certain type of professionals, you know, that perform certain services, all of these things are seen as immoderate, you know. In Ifá, you know, it recommends staying within the home, within the relationship, focus, which leads to true enjoyment. But any lack of control, especially in this area, led to destruction time and time again. And Osang and Shango were prime examples of that, for sure. We've spoken about drugs. We've spoken about sex, gambling. Another vice is stealing, right? Theft can be a vice. Theft is something that is highly frowned upon within Ifá. Ifá states that, you know, whether it's in the Odù Ifá, where it says that the person would steal over and over and over again, and they would steal high-value items, but they noticed that they couldn't sell them, or the money would disappear, or the things they wanted to buy with the money weren't available, and they went to visit Oromila. And the Odù Ifá was revealed, where Ifá stated that the reason, even though you're stealing a volume of things and it's not providing any dividends, is because there's a curse on the act of stealing within Ifá that, it actually takes you 10 steps backwards every time. So the more you steal, you think you're getting ahead, when in reality, you're just sinking into a hole. That's why the people that work hard for what they have and they invest and, they're astute and they analyze, they progress quite a bit. So the person put Orumila's, concepts to the test. He gave things back. He wouldn't steal things. He noticed they left something in the cart at Publix, and they actually would tell the cashier about it rather than just ignoring it and acting like they didn't know. And they noticed this exponential progress within their life to the point where they said, I'll never steal again. I'll never take anything that's not mine. And then you look at the Odù Ifá, where the servant actually stole the king's ring, and it cost him his life because the king had performed sacrifice. Eshu became a dog, and he came home or to his bedchamber earlier than expected, and the servant hid in a box. Eshu, receiving the sacrifice and becoming the dog or influencing the dog, started barking at the chest where the servant was, and the king ordered the royal guard to just stab the box, right? And when they stabbed the box, or they stuck their swords in it, when they opened it, it was the servant dead, and the missing ring fell out of his hand. So the servant, unfortunately, he didn't realize, hey, I live in the palace. The king's very good to me. Like, I have no reason to steal. But he couldn't handle not doing it. He couldn't handle the desire of the king's ring, and it ended up costing him his life. So definitely another vice as well. Vices, right? I mean, Ifá has identified taboos because that is actually the central message within our whole spirituality. The whole reason we do Hand of Ifá or Itefa or Orisha is to identify our Ewo. Ewo is manifested in the Odù of Oturatiyu or Otura Irete. And they're actually the most important thing to avoid, right? You can learn all of the great things you can do, but they pale in comparison to the importance of the things you should not do. And that's what Ewo is. Now, there are lineages that perform the ceremony of Ewo, where you literally consult Ifá to see what your personal taboos are. But at the end of the day, if it's in your sign, it's something you should be careful with. And then you also have, congenital Ewos, right? Those that are born with you. Like, if you're allergic to something, even if Ifá doesn't speak about it, it's still a taboo for you because that's just one that Ori came with. So a big thing is to notice what works for you and what doesn't, because everybody is different. Mind you, the things that we've spoken about in this video can be seen as a little extreme, but society is a little extreme right now. And that's why Ifá has been able to see the elevation of so many people who have come to it for true betterment. So if you're looking for a spirituality that is going to provide you the advice and literature and guidance and mentorship to the best you, Ifá is for you for sure, because it is a personalized religion. Your Odù is your guide, map, and possibly cheat code to life in all the right ways. So definitely take advantage of that information. Sit down with your elders. Have transparency. If you're in the position of elder and confidant, have that maturity and solidarity with the person to maintain their privacy. And great things come from that.
You want to know what my vice was? It was
podcasting.
Well, no. It was food, man. I was at my heaviest, I was 411 pounds.
Yeah. Emotional eating, or just the coping that comes with it. And we didn't even talk about food. Forgive me. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
The Odù of Obeyono, or Obeorio Gunda, says the bigger the stomach gets, the smaller the head gets. And it's not just speaking about, the physicality of it. It's speaking about the mentality of it. The more we ingest, the less we're thinking, right? Remember that we want to be accountable with what we're eating. We don't want to do absent-minded feeding where we're just putting things in our body. Remember, the brain can't register everything we eat immediately. We have to give it a little bit of time. That's why we got to chew, take our time, etc. Because it speaks of the crocodile, where the crocodile would just eat. And then when it would try to come on land, it had immobility. And he was looking at Orula, and Orula was like, hey, man, a little less fish, and he was able to, burn that off and become agile and things again, because his immobility was going to lead to his mortality. Because the greatest signs of progress or mortality is mobility. When we look at a child and we look at his development, is he walking? That's key. Or when we look at somebody who's elderly, have they stopped walking? that's a key moment. You know, all of these things, and Obeyono speaks of it. So we definitely want to be accountable. We want to put good things in our body. I mean, there's so many resources and information now, you know, to be able to construct, whether it's a action plan, workout plan, health plan, diet plan. You know, Ifá says that this is a vice as well. You know, anything that could provide some sort of gratification or dopamine release could turn into a vice, because this is what the brain craves. You know, people say the brain is as perfect as a computer. Well, it has some fallacies in it. You know, if we allow things to get out of control, it can run us. So, you know, if you notice that things are out of control, or you can't go a couple of days without something, or you're constantly in this situation, it's something to be analyzed, and that's okay. Because it's not to say we can't enjoy the healthy things, but they become unhealthy when we become immoderate. So that was Ifá's whole thing, moderation, you know, little by little. Yeah. Perfect point there in Eyobe. It says it, where it says, little by little, eat the head of the rat, fish, hen, and goat. So it's saying little by little, you know, and that's how life is. It's a marathon and not a sprint.
All right.
All right.
Great episode, guys. If y'all like this episode, make sure you drop a like, comment. Make sure you share, and if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. We're almost at 200,000.
Oh, man.
Make sure you guys do that. And if you want to know more, you can join our membership program. It's real simple. It's a little button right under this video, and it takes you to a place where you guys can enjoy
a magical place.
Magical place. You know, that people say they like Disney, but they have not experienced the Joseph Baba Ifá Our Roots podcast membership program.
Oh, Walt.
Right? So, yeah, it's extra shows, discounts on merch and classes. We got private shows just for you guys. Joseph's going to be answering questions in the groups where in the comments that are just longer than 1 or 2 sentences. So expanded videos on that. So we're going to show love to our premium super fans today.
Awesome.
These are going to be the newbies. People have just rejoined, or they have a small time on our channel here.
Well, welcome. We're happy to have you.
So yeah, so let me go. All right, CJ Villa.
All right, CJ.
They've been they rejoined about 3 days ago.
Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, we got Nikki Mixon.
All right,
rejoined
Nick.
about 4 days ago.
Okay.
All right, and we got Ramona Acevedo. They are a premium super fan. They've been a super fan for 8 months.
Awesome.
No, sorry, 11 months. My bad.
Nice, very nice.
We got Jay Palacios, super fan for 12 months, so a year.
Nice, thank you.
We got Jelena Quinn. They just upgraded 10 days ago.
Okay.
Premium super fan.
Upgrade.
Yep. We got Hotlanta 7828. They upgraded to premium super fan.
Oh, thank you.
About 27 days ago.
Nice.
We got Wolf. Wolf has been a total member for about 14 months, but they
my gosh,
about 2 months ago.
Thank you.
And Goddess Diana, who's been a premium super fan for 8 months, but they just rejoined about 4 months ago.
We appreciate you guys. You're the best part of the channel for sure. If you know anybody who can gain some value from it, let them know about it. And apart from that, if you really want to learn something, I'll see you at those workshops in Atlanta and New York, right? BotanicaCandlesandMore.com is up and running for all your product and service needs. We ship. If you can't watch us here on YouTube, be sure to listen to us on all those major applications. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, guys. A big thank you from all of us here at Our Roots. And until next time, see the light.
Baba Joseph showed the path today. Baba knows the way, we follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients, he honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.